These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
All right, we got Judd here. It's Mackey, and it's a Friday edition of Flagrant Howls, as we have spent the last 24 hours now just digesting and reading up. We've I would say it's a combination of three things. We've been talking to different people that have information, and we can relay some of that today. We've been reading great reporting from various local and national outlets, and we'll fill you in on some of that. And then we've just been stewing and formulating our own thoughts and takes off of this latest Timberwolves ownership drama here. So that's what this episode's going to be, Judd. It's going to be the day after, the second day, dust sort of settling, reporting and thoughts on everything that dropped yesterday surrounding Glen Taylor, Alex Rodriguez, and Marc Lore.
One quick thought, too. Just to be clear, I don't think this does anything to take away from what the Wolves are doing on the court, and I don't think this is a distraction at all to players.
Hopefully not.
Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong in sports, and we have seen them. I mean, heck, the Vikings have had basically, at various times things go wrong across the board. But I don't feel like this one, like I think that this has long-ranging impact on the franchise for sure. I think that ultimately, and we can definitely discuss this, in the front office, it could impact things eventually here. But I don't think there's any fear of, oh boy, the players are going to, I don't even know the players care about stuff like this. Do you?
If I'm Anthony Edwards, though, I don't care tonight against the Nuggets. Listen, you're so far into the season right now, and the playoffs are on the horizon. You're just like, you know what, guys, just stay out of our way. Let us finish out the season.
Right.
But as you start to look long-term, Glen Taylor is such a bad, bumbling owner when he is left to his own devices and he doesn't, because a lot of the stuff that's been built the last 2 years, the roster, I mean, Anthony Edwards was drafted by Gerson Rosas, who was here under Glen Taylor before Marc or Alex came along. But some of the key hires behind the scenes, Tim Connolly, there's a couple other vice president or C-level people that have been hired behind the scenes as culture builders too. And a lot of this roster that's built by Tim Connolly, this is all kind of funneling through the Alex and Marc minority ownership. Glenn has empowered those guys thinking that they were going to be majority owners at some point. Why don't you come in here, treat it like your own home? Yes, you can make the GM hire. He literally let those guys make the GM hire. Now, it's Glenn's money, and Glenn had to sign off as the final approval. But that's what's so interesting about this. In long term, if those guys are gone, if I'm Anthony Edwards,
then it has
I
an
don't know,
impact.
in 5 years from now, I don't know what this looks like.
But a guy like that too, though, as far as the season goes, I guarantee you is so focused. He might have read about this. That's it. Like guys like that are just, and that's the thing that the great athletes have that us common people lack. They have an ability to focus and believe in things that we're all like, oh my God, this team's in trouble. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
So yes, long term, there are things here that definitely are going to impact the franchise and potentially players as well.
And as we'll get into with some of this reporting, we should also make room for, I think we've thought for 2 years, we've had this Pollyanna view of Marc and Alex coming in. Boy, A-Rod, what a changed man he has been the last 10 years. And I do still think he is a changed man in many ways compared to the end of his playing days. But this is going to be great. We're all just going to hold hands and skip into Timberwolves' future. But there's a lot of red flags surrounding what they were trying to put together where maybe you could make a case that Glen Taylor saved the Wolves from something and fans from something that would have been even worse in 3 or 5 years. Which we'll get into some of that.
And for the record, I have not trusted A-Rod ever. Since the day he walked in the door, I told you I was skeptical.
Write that down prediction came out
on Lore
yesterday.
On Lore, I didn't know, and I was up front. But what you're going to get into about what the Post has is absolutely fascinating because I had no clue.
Yeah. So let's start here. Yesterday, Glen Taylor did a media tour, and you can find 2 different episodes on the Flagrant Howls feed of us breaking down everything happening on the first day of this with Doogie in real time, and then with Kyle and I breaking down sort of our thoughts on it. But Glenn, throughout all of this, was doing different interviews with publications, and he was on Chad Hartman's radio show on WCCO, and he essentially confirmed that he did get cold feet in multiple interviews. He's thrilled that the team is winning, and it wasn't as much 3 years ago, even though he has very little to do with the product being better. It's not like he became this amazing owner overnight.
Correct.
New smart people came in and helped to change the culture. He confirmed that he is thrilled that the team has doubled in value. And his quote was that, yes, that is part of this equation when he talked to Chad Hartman. Mm-hmm. So it would appear that he is trying to take advantage of this deadline potentially being missed. And now there's going to be a legal battle, it appears, between both these parties. And this is from the Star Tribune. One source of the disagreement revolves around Section 6.4A of the pact between the parties. Lore and A-Rod, as part of their sale agreement, exercised a call option on December 31st for the so-called second tranche of the sale. That gave them a nearly 3-month window, which closed on Wednesday this week, to consummate that part of the sale for 40% of the teams. This was the same process Lore and A-Rod used to purchase approximately 20% of the franchise in 2023. But that deadline can be extended by 90 days if the sides are awaiting league approval to finish the deal. So, hey, here's our group, here's our money, here's what this thing looks like. You send it off, and the league now has to approve it. A source said Lore and A-Rod submitted financial paperwork to the league last week before the deadline to consummate the deal, and they argue that that constitutes another 90-day extension. Hey, we submitted this before the deadline. Now it goes for league approval, and as long as it's waiting for league approval, there has to be another 90-day extension. Mm-hmm. Glen Taylor, however, said an agreement between him, Lore, and A-Rod would have to occur first before the league would then approve. That deal didn't happen, Taylor maintains. So maybe bad communication between the two sides?
Well, according to Dukes, there was none.
For a long time.
Like they quit. Like it sounds like Glenn tried to get hold of A-Rod and Lore, and they basically didn't return calls, if you are to believe that, which I'm sure comes from Glenn. Yeah. But like it was, I saw that multiple places, that there was a gap in the communication here, which I'm sure did not help in bolstering a relationship that we thought was really good at one point.
Which is weird because they're literally walking around the hallways of Target Center on the same day for games.
The whole thing's weird.
So that's sort of, okay, that's where this is going to wind. You're going to have third parties and lawyers trying to figure out, okay, legally, can Glenn do what he did, which is take the Wolves off the market?
And supposedly, from the stories that I read yesterday, supposedly within this agreement was also an agreement that if something like this were to take place, it would go before mediation and arbitration first.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean it can't go to court, but that there would be some type of third party, not a judge necessarily in a court of law, to come in.
Yeah. And what I don't get here, and this is where smarter people than us have to jump in and figure this out. The last line in this Star Tribune report says, Taylor said an agreement between him, Lore, and A-Rod would have to occur first before the league would then approve. Well, isn't that what the agreement was 3 years ago? Which is, here's the framework of how you can purchase a majority stake. Hit these different deadlines.
Yeah.
And A-Rod and Lore are claiming we did hit those deadlines. We hit the last one here as well.
Was there a final agreement that was supposed to take place?
Where Taylor needs to look you in the eye. And
like there's a loophole here of some sort that Glenn is trying to use, no question.
I needed to look him in the eye.
Yeah, Andrew Wiggins, don't remind me of that. Yeah, that's great.
So then we'll get to the New York Post stuff is great, but I want to sum up the David Samson podcast appearance on the Dan Le Batard show from yesterday. Mm-hmm. So David Samson was the president of the Miami Marlins, the Florida Marlins, Miami Marlins for a long time. And he dealt with Alex Rodriguez on a sales process with the Marlins a while back. A few years ago, Alex was trying to put together a group to buy a stake of or majority control of the Marlins, right? So this is like, you can go find this on the Dan Le Batard YouTube channel, on the podcast feed. It's like a 20-minute podcast episode. I'm going to sum it up with a few different points. David Samson said, Alex Rodriguez has always desperately wanted to be an owner. And he has all the things you could want, like the baseball background, the sports background. He's got different connections.
The suits.
He's got the suits. He's got the smile.
The smooth. Yep.
He can connect with the players. He can connect with fans. But the one thing that he never had was the money or the group necessary to raise the money. And so with this particular instance with the Timberwolves, according to David Samson, who's very plugged in with all things, he literally does a sports business podcast for Dan Le Batard, and he's plugged into front offices and ownership groups and finance companies, right? So he said it was Lore's role early in this process with the Timberwolves to put the initial huge chunk of money down. And Lore was never really supposed to put more money in beyond that first wave. It was, okay, let's come in. It's Marc and Alex. Marc puts down the first big chunk, and then Alex was supposed to spend the next 2 years raising enough money for them to have put equal money in.
Which I never saw until I heard this.
Me either.
I always assumed that Marc was the lead and that Alex was along for the ride. I had no idea that Marc was basically going to tell A-Rod, all right, buddy, pony it up now. Go find it. I had no clue.
More on that coming as well.
All right.
But yeah, it's been on A-Rod for the last couple years to find his share of what they're supposed to put in. So as it stands right now, and Glen Taylor was very cold in his commentary on multiple platforms yesterday, A-Rod and Lore combined are 36% owners of the Timberwolves. And Glen Taylor said, hey, I've had minority owners, limited partners my whole career, and this is no different. They still own part of the team. I own the controlling stake of the team, but yeah, I'll treat them just like I treat all my other limited partners. It'll be great. But of that 36%, Marc Lore owns 27%, and Alex Rodriguez owns 9%. So we'll come back to that in a second. In A-Rod's effort to get up closer to Marc Lore's level of investment, he's been talking to different people, different private equity firms.
Right.
A couple of which one that wasn't approved by the NBA, one that has been approved, but for like 5 or 6% chunks. It sounds like A-Rod was going after bigger chunks because he needed more money, right?
Right, exactly.
But according to David Samson, A-Rod and Lore and led by A-Rod, were trying to raise money not at a $1.5 billion valuation, which is the valuation they locked their deal in 2 years ago at. They were out there in these boardrooms, or Alex was, trying to lock these other investors in at a $2.5 billion valuation, which means a lower percentage. So, hey, we'll give you $150 million, which at a $1.5 billion valuation, you'd get 10% of the pie, right? He's saying, well, no, it's a $2.5 billion valuation. So he's not,
which is the valuation now of the franchise.
Right. But the selling price is 1.5.
Yeah. Oh,
so he's kind of trying to like swindle these. And I know that this happens in
it's A-Rod. Yeah, no question about it. Well, he needs to.
So the New York Post, let's get to some of this, all right? Because this is all just, ordinarily we don't just spend the entire podcast reading things from publications, but I don't know. This is so fascinating and so relevant. Mm-hmm. Let's go through it and give our thoughts. So a New York Post article that came out yesterday essentially confirms it's been A-Rod's job to find more money the last 2 years after Lore's initial large investment, and he's been having a hard time putting together those final pieces. Quote from the article, I'm just going to read this. Right now, Marc Lore has been laser focused on keeping his gourmet food delivery company Wonder alive and thriving. He said in recent months, Marc Lore has invested several $100 million in the money-losing startup Wonder and just completed a $700 million round of financing, sources said. I don't think I have this in my notes, but I saw in this article that Marc Lore is working 100 hours a week, that's what he said, on Wonder.
Yeah, he told Glenn that.
Which is why you don't see him courtside, shoes off, traveling around like a couple years ago, right? The New York Times this month published a feature on Lore and his plans to make Wonder a $30 billion market cap company in the future. Lore owns more than half of that company, and it represents much of his current net worth. If Lore were to sell the stake he already bought in the Timberwolves, estimated at 27% right now, he could double his money and use that to help wonder or replenish his coffers. Because, yeah, like the team has doubled in value. He could sell his minority stake, come out with a nice little profit, and dump it into his startup project, right?
100%.
And I'll give you this last nugget here that we can expound. Part of Lore's attraction to A-Rod at the time 3 years ago was A-Rod's then girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, the Post previously reported. It was shortly before A-Rod and Lore, I'm sorry, it was shortly before A-Rod and J-Lo called off their engagement that A-Rod and Lore launched their bid for the Timberwolves. And A-Rod wasn't well prepared for the breakup from a financial standpoint, according to sources. So Lore and A-Rod, hey, let's put this group together. We've got J-Lo,
hey,
maybe
J-Lo,
involved
come
in
in
some
here. You want to
right?
sign this? We're involved in a sports team. And don't forget, right before this, they were very much in the mix by the Mets.
Yeah.
And J-Lo was playing a key role.
Yep. So that's the summary of where this thing is at after 24 hours. At the end of the day, if legally, according to the contract, despite how rickety it has seemed, if A-Rod and Lore have put together enough to become the controlling owners of this team,
right?
Glenn might not get to determine what he thought he was determining in that press release yesterday. This is going to be decided by lawyers, first and foremost.
Yep. Well,
courts.
But I agree completely. And I said that immediately just because of, well, to start with, how the Timberwolves, how the Glen Taylor press release was very carefully crafted. And then, of course, Glenn goes on shows and starts to run his mouth a little bit. And that's probably not the smartest thing. He actually, in my opinion, said some things like with Chad Hartman on CCO that are going to be used against him.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, the buyer's remorse thing, you do not say that. What you say is, hey, they didn't meet the requirement. Personally, if I was Glenn and as a member of the media, I applaud him. Personally, if I was his counsel, I would have said, you know what, Glenn, let the release speak for you. No, just no. The press release is very, very fair. But anyway, so this show, the two of us for sure, have spent a long time being hard on Glenn. He, as an owner, he's done some, I mean, it's been a disaster for the most part. Yep. Now, he did save the team in 94. And I think if the preference was, hey, since, you know, for the last 30 years, it's been the New Orleans Wolves, I would prefer the team is here. So I do appreciate that. But there have been missteps. There has been, he for sort of a sweet old guy as he comes off, he does some, and again, he did it yesterday, some real cutthroat business things. Like you could see why his businesses, not his sports team, there's a big difference, but his true businesses are successful. Glenn has no problem taking a hatchet to things he does not like.
Yeah.
But I am going to defend him on this because if the Post story is correct, and in this case, I know the Post can be irresponsible at times. This reporting seems solid. If this is the case, all right, two things here. One is if Alex Rodriguez really was the key guy, I'll take Glenn being back. I don't trust him. I don't trust totally that if Alex had gotten the capital that he wanted and they didn't get a building, I think he looks to move. And let me be clear about one thing. I keep getting notes, and Royce said it with us as well on Unchained on Friday. This whole thing, the NBA will not allow a team to move because they're going to expand to Seattle or Vegas. I agree. They want to, okay? But the last time I checked, there's no announcement. There's no nothing. Mm-hmm. And teams can, if you are the Timberwolves and you don't get a building and you tell the league, we got to get out of here. And there's no plan for climate pledge in Seattle. Don't tell me that there's no way the Wolves, like, to me, that's the most dangerous thing. The North Stars they'll never leave. It's Minnesota. Oh, they left. So, like, yes, some things are a bluff, contraction with the Twins.
Yeah.
But don't get high on your horse that this team is grounded here and nothing can change that. That's haughty. That's dangerous. But if indeed Lore also, who, you know what, I'm not surprised the way that he moves quickly, and I mean, I think he's a smart dude. But I could see him
very ADD with like
and initially
nine-figure businesses.
And think about the Wolves. Oh my God, I own an NBA team. We're gonna own, and this is great. I'm gonna invest $27 million, and this is gonna be fantastic.
No, let's go build a new city for the future.
Exactly.
Let's go build this.
And then J-Lo gets out, and then it's like you're left with Alex. And by the way, every story you've ever read about Alex is he doesn't wear well on people. Like you think about some of the stories like with Jeter and stuff. Doesn't really wear well on people. So I actually in this case, I'm going to applaud Glenn because as and I know that fans don't like Glenn, but I think that this is the best thing for this franchise now. My real question though, Phil, is this. What does the future hold as far as this franchise goes? Like, does somebody here want to buy it eventually? Because that's been a problem. It makes me very nervous that there could be a chance that Glenn's family owns up with this team now, that Glenn, once he passes, and that then do they just sell this team? Because I'll go back again to, I think this notion that the team is not going to move is a dangerous game to play.
So, man, so many things here.
A lot to go on.
Good stuff, man. I would say I agree that we've largely been super hard on Glenn, like ruthlessly hard on Glenn on our podcast, on our old radio show. I think, and I will state this unequivocally, I think Glen Taylor is one of the worst owners of take the 4 major professional sports leagues. I think in my lifetime watching sports, I was born in 1985. He is one of the 5 or 6 worst owners of a professional sports team that's been there for at least 5 or 10 years. Not these like short flash in the pan, right?
Sure.
It's been chaos, dysfunction, and incompetence for the majority of the 3 decades he's owned this team. Embarrassment, losing, failure, all of those words. And he is the common denominator. If it's not KG propping your franchise up as a player or Flip Saunders as a leader, it's been embarrassing. And the Wolves have been a punchline. And Glen Taylor is the one that has overseen all of it. He's made some of the most ridiculous hires. Culturally, everything has been off. So I just want to state that unequivocally. And I will also say, in the last 2 years, from what I've heard and observed, Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore have been very hands-on and instrumental in helping to build up this new winning product that you're seeing, from hiring Tim Connolly and changing some things behind the scenes, being more player-friendly. They hired Tim Connolly. They hired key staffers behind the scenes. They're the ones that are connecting better with Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, et cetera, on a human level than Glenn is. Like, Anthony Edwards isn't going over and dapping up Glen Taylor in his little sweaters and stuff. Like, it's not. He's in his 80s. You know, So I think all of that is true, and I don't want to live in a world following this Wolves team and wanting this Wolves team to succeed where Glen Taylor is the owner for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years without some sort of succession plan that we've seen the last 2 years. Like, I don't want Glen Taylor to own this team anymore. Period. But in the conversations I've had the last 24 hours, and some of the people I've talked to, people that are way more plugged in than I am, I have heard very reliably that there's some concern with the A-Rod and Lore group that even if they do cobble together the finances to get this thing greenlit and the NBA approves it, sorry, Glenn, your press release means nothing, Mark and Alex are the new owners of this franchise, that they would essentially be house poor owners in the National Basketball Association.
Yeah.
That Marc Lore, so much of his worth is tied up in these startups. And Alex doesn't have that kind of bleep you NBA owner money that a lot of the Matt Ishbias and what's his name, the Clippers owner, right? Like
Ballmer,
Steve Ballmer, that they're gonna get this team, and there is concern that they're not going to be able to run it and operate it at the level that you need to financially to pay luxury tax and to pay a bunch of smart people in front offices and to pay second apron luxury tax and to get a new arena and all these things, right? Like, it's not just getting enough money together to buy the team. As we saw with Red McCombs, Red McCombs found enough money to buy the Vikings 20, 30 years ago. He didn't have enough money to run the thing, at a high level compared to other National Football League teams. So that's the thing. Like, is there a world where Glen Taylor is actually saving the Timberwolves from
his own mistake?
A rickety, his own mistake.
He's the one that agreed to a sale.
It's complicated.
Well,
and by the way, Marc Lore, part of the NBA approval process. Okay, they're going to vet this whole thing. Wait a second. Yeah. The guy that owns the biggest stake in the team now, if this thing goes through, is working 100 hours a week on this other startup over here. And
He's
this
lost interest.
Like, who is going to be on the ground in Minnesota running the franchise? Like, that has to matter too, right?
No one. And Alex will fly in, but he's not going to live. That whole thing, I'm shoveling in Minnesota. I mean, he probably knocked on the guy's door and said, "Hey, can I take a picture in your driveway? Where's your shovel?" So here's the thing that I think is important to keep in mind, because I think it brings some sanity to the discussion. Although again, this does come back to Glenn, which is unfortunate, but it does. If the day this deal went down, I had told you, Lore's sort of a in and out guy. Like, he'll be really excited for a while. Because he'll be here all the time, taking his shoes off, but he's got the attention span of a gnat. So like, he'll be going on to something else, and that's just him. It's clearly him.
Yeah.
But Phil, the reality is this. Don't repeat this to anybody. A-Rod is going to have to raise a lot of funds, and he's basically going to be the front-facing owner of this team. I don't think any of us would have said, that's a good idea. I thought Alex was the caddy. And Lore, who to me is the unknown. I don't like Alex. Lore, to me, I have no idea. I thought he was the front-facing, but I also thought he was going to put in almost all the cash.
Well, he has to this point.
Right. No, he has. But the fact that wasn't the plan, the fact that was not the plan.
Yeah.
Yes, I think Glenn made a mistake. Plus, I'm not sure about you. This succession plan thing, I never really liked. Like
it's weird, dude.
I've got notes here. Okay.
Weird.
Let me just go through the last 3 teams sold. So not the Wolves, the last 3 teams. The Mavericks were sold by Cuban. Mark Cuban sold his majority stake in the Mavericks this year or late last year. $3.5 billion. Sale done. No succession plan. Sale done. Cuban's still involved, but he didn't say, I'm going to teach you the ropes while you give me checks once a year.
Yeah.
The Bucks, same price, by the way, which tells me that the Wolves at $2.5 billion is probably low, and it's how bad they need a new building. The Bucks, $3.5 billion, sold from a partner there to Jimmy Haslam. Okay. The Suns, Robert Sarver was forced out because he turned out to be a complete creep. By the way, the one good thing about Glenn is he's not a creep. He's just not a great,
he's a bumpkin. He's a bumpkin.
Not a great owner of a sports franchise. Robert Sarver sold the Suns to Matt Ishbia for $4 billion, which was a record. But again, Ishbia walked in, gave him a credit card, gave him a check. For all I know, he gave him $4 billion in cash. Deal done.
I think Ishbia, didn't he also give everyone who works for the Suns like a $5,000 bonus? And
I think he did.
Aren't they putting the games on TV
for free?
For free?
Yeah, I think the Jazz are as well. And they just got sold to a guy that's so rich, he is now trying to get a hockey team in Utah. But the point is, this whole succession plan thing, first of all, it's my opinion that if I'm a league, if you're going to sell your team, that's cool. More power to you. But, gradually you'll make payments. So I'm not absolving Glenn. Glenn, again, got weird here. But if you were going to tell me that A-Rod was going to be the front-facing huge investor, I never would have had a positive opinion of this whole thing.
Yeah, man. I think at the end of the day here, it feels like we're dealing with 2 potentially bad options. We're dealing with Glen Taylor continuing as the majority owner of a franchise without the safety net of a couple of smart, energetic, enthused successors to be making the hiring. Because if this goes back to Glen Taylor, majority owner, and Mark and Alex decide we're going to sell our, you know what, we didn't get the majority, and so we're not Minnesotans. Let's take our profits that have doubled and just peace out, go back to Miami, go back to New York, which I think is likely at some point. If they don't get the majority stake, I think those guys are going to divest.
Yep.
So that would be to me a terrible option. But another terrible option would be if some of the buzz that I'm hearing is right, which is, hey, these guys become new owners. People are excited at first, but Marc Lore is super distracted, doesn't really care anymore. And Alex and the other part of the group don't have the finances needed to operate this thing at something other than a shoestring budget, and they're basically house poor owners in the NBA.
Yep.
That could be really bad. Is there another option here where somebody that has actual bleep you money, like NBA owner bleep you money, can buy this team and not immediately want to move them to Las Vegas or Seattle? Is there an option 3 I can sign up for here?
Well, if Alex and Lori, and I'm sort of with you on Marc now, like he's got so much going on. Does he really want to tie up funds and time in a lawsuit? Well, like at first, yesterday, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be in court for a long time. But if Lori is like, you know what, I sort of don't care anymore. And Alex still might want to sue, but remember, he just ain't that rich. He's rich, but he ain't that rich. So I'm sort of with you on, I could see them saying, hey, peace out, didn't work, we tried. But my concern about the Wolves is anybody who's going to have, it's very clear, to have the funds to say, you know what, Glenn, here's a check, go away, is then going to turn around and immediately say, build me a building.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to get, like, I love Glenn's quote. I think it was to Royce about, yeah, Target Centers, I need some improvements again, but it's okay for now. Like, it's literally, you're in a basement, it's leaking. Like, you can improve it all you want. It's lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
So I think the unfortunate thing is, the answer to your question is not unless they get a building, in which case I think they'd be fine. Again, the Milwaukee Bucks sold for $3.5 billion with a new building.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that Milwaukee is a more desirable market than here. It's not. But Pfizer Forum was built, and so now they're in the state-of-the-art glorious palace.
What did
did
Pfizer Forum, because I have a point off this. Pfizer Forum price. How much did they pay to build that thing? Or was it $1 billion? I'm going to just type in billion here and see, because I have a point off this, because I have been hearing 1.2 billion.
Okay.
1.4, 1.4 billion. So I have been hearing for 2 years that as part of the grandiose plan here, hey, they're going to put together the money to get the team, and then they're going to put together the money to privately finance a new arena and maybe a development area around a new arena, because they know how hard it is. Trust me, you know, Alex and Marc know how hard it is in Minnesota to get a deal done. Look at the Vikings. We're sick of paying billions of dollars for stadiums for billionaires, right? Like that's, right. I think that's what you run into here in Minnesota.
Yes.
But here's the problem. If it is taking this much effort to hit the deadlines for a $1.5 billion valuation franchise, highly discounted from the $2.5 billion valuation that you would get right now, maybe 3.5 billion.
And yeah, it might be worth more.
Where are you getting the money now, and where's the group coming? Are there different groups that would invest in the real estate project versus the team that's going to be a $1.5 billion arena project?
And not with guys
Where's that coming from?
That are already either, in Alex's case, poor because of the cost of the franchise, or again, in Marc's case, now maybe Lori would become more engaged again if you're like, hey, okay, the basketball team thing's done. Now you can build a new city or a new building. But yeah, this is where you just need someone, and I don't know that person exists here, to write that check and move on from there, which is why I was called crazy, but I suggested on Twitter, the best hope might be the Wilfs, which I've said all along.
I said the same thing independently of you. I didn't know that you tweeted that. I said the same thing, not tongue in cheek, by the way. They have not won a championship, but in terms of how players in the league feel about them as owners, the facilities,
and they got the money. I think they've got them. Like, I think they can write the check and walk away.
Yeah.
You know, not be like, hey, Glenn, can we learn from you?
So much fun.
The only thing that I keep coming back to, and it pisses people off, and I agree, this is not great. I don't know you're going to replace Target Center on that footprint or downtown. Because who's going to help with that? The county's tapped out. The city ain't going to help anymore, I don't think. Like, my point was, could you put it out by the Vikings facility? Because the Wilfs own a ton of land in Eagan. And I know we all think, oh my God, but it's near the airport. It's not far from the Mall of America. Like when I was a kid, that was considered the bumpkin land. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
But if you did an arena out there, guess what you got now? You got a district around it, which you don't have downtown. You've got parking, which you don't have downtown. Like you have parking for you, but what you pay in the ramps does not go to the team.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And I'd rather save the Wolves than be like, they're either staying downtown or we'll see you in Nashville.
Yeah. And if this goes through and A-Rod and Lore do not have the money to privately finance an arena, and then they start to try and strong arm the taxpayers, where does that wind up going? Does it lead to them leaving anyways? Like, this is,
you know how much that costs, though?
Such a mess.
Like, if you fund a stadium or arena, the price of that and the taxes you have to, I mean, I believe it was, who was the mayor when the soccer team literally said, we will do all the work to build a stadium behind
Betsy
Target
Hodges.
Field. Yeah, but we need a tax break here and there. And she's like, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
So if
that
you're not
seems
willing
like a very bad, short-sighted decision, by the way.
Oh, I think it was a terrible decision because I think that would have been an ideal place. But my point is, I think if you want to save the Wolves, we eventually are going to have to come to a determination of a plan that might not be choice A.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think there's got to be a door number 3 or a door C here somewhere. But this is not going away tomorrow. This isn't just Glen Taylor put out a press release and Mark and Alex are like, well, we're mad about that, but okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, dude, Alex is going to these games. He's sitting courtside. Mark doesn't go to very many games, if any, anymore. But are they going to be? Are Glenn and A-Rod going to be sitting across from each other at these stretch run Timberwolves games? Are the fans going to start booing Glen Taylor and cheering A-Rod?
Pay-per-view cameras. Glenn on the Wolves side, A-Rod across. And then somewhere else, KG comes in the building.
Dude,
you put a camera
KG's
on that.
thoughts on this. He's injected into my veins.
How quickly do you think Alex called KG after that all went down yesterday? You think it took him a minute? You think it took him 2 minutes?
Now, both of those guys in their own ways, KG too, like, I do blame Glenn for the majority of all of it. But KG can be a little tough to deal with behind the scenes. But yeah, it's just, it's such a mess. Let's put a bow on this podcast here before my head explodes.
We didn't even touch on like the Tim Conley stuff.
I know.
And what his contract might say, since he wasn't hired by, like he's being paid by Glenn, but he wasn't hired by Glenn.
No, because that's the thing. Like, part of the energy here, if you're a Tim Conley, you were in Marc Lore's Manhattan skyrise, right?
He's the guy hired you.
So if he decides, you know what, man, yeah, I'm gonna peace out of here, and now it's just like you and Glen Taylor in the offices.
Oh, and Tim Conley could get a job tomorrow. Like, his stock has only gone up again.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to take over? Pat Riley's retiring, he's not yet, but like, do you want to take over for Pat Riley and run the Heat? Sure. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Oh, my wife likes it when it's warm in January. Why don't I take that job? Anyway.
So it's classic, like, whoever you blame, it's another classic, just Timberwolves Glen Taylor operation here where the bleep hits the fan and we're fumbling all over ourselves. We'll see what else breaks over the weekend, but in the meantime, Wolves and Nuggets tonight for first place in the Western Conference.
Let's go.
Let's freaking go. This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls.